The world's 7 most devastating volcanic eruptions. Volcanic eruptions have the capacity to wipe out entire cities, change the temperature of the entire world, and wreck economies. They have the potential to unleash toxic gases, crushing mudflows, suffocating ash, and rivers of molten lava that cause damage for years to come. The Volcanic Explosivity Index is used to gauge the size of volcanic eruptions in a manner similar to the Richter scale for earthquakes, VEI. Volcanic explosions are ranked on the VEI scale from 1 to 8, with 1 denoting a mild lava flow and 8 denoting a mega-colossal explosion. The size of an eruption is a good predictor, but it does not always indicate its impact. Calculating the estimated loss of life is one of the most used methods for assessing the destruction caused by an eruption. A loss of nourishment can cause death in addition to that caused by an eruption's byproducts. According to Kelsey Dadd, a specialist in the subject of volcanology at the University of Sydney, crops can be covered by ash or animals can be poisoned by compounds in the ash. Because of the temperature drop, which can result in crop failure across a wide area, big eruptions can be devastating. Economic damage can also result from volcanic eruptions. While estimating the economic cost of prehistoric eruptions is essentially theoretical, estimating the costs of more recent eruptions involves estimating the damage to local infrastructure and the impact on local residents' ability to earn a living. According to a United Nations research, volcanic eruptions caused damages of $152.6 billion between 1995 and 2015, or around $7.6 billion each year. A volcanic explosion can have a huge impact, depending on its size, death toll, and economic cost. Here are 10 of the world's most catastrophic volcanic eruptions. 1. Mount Tambora, Indonesia, 1815, VEI 7. With up to 120,000 fatalities, Mount Tambora is the deadliest eruption in recent human history. Tambora erupted on April 10, 1815, spewing 40 kilometers of volcanic ash into the sky. The explosion was the most intense in 500 years. A string of enormous tsunamis were produced as a result of the pyroclastic flow's force when it entered the ocean. Global crop failures were caused by the massive amount of SO2 that was released, which also caused a sharp drop in global temperature. While typhus swept over Europe, thousands of people in China died from starvation. The cost of grain increased by more than 4 times in Switzerland in the 2 years following the explosion. 2. Krakatoa, Indonesia, 1883, VEI 6. One of the most destructive eruptions in modern human history, the Indonesian volcano Krakatoa utterly destroyed the island on which it is located. The volcano's walls were shattered by a series of enormous eruptions early on August 27. The final eruption of Krakatoa was 4 times more powerful than the biggest bomb ever dropped by humans. Its radio waves circled the world 7 times. It caused a string of tsunamis that wreaked havoc on the area, killing some 36,000 people and wiping out entire villages. The cost of the eruption has been put as high as $1.5 billion by some. 3. Laki, Iceland, 1783, VEI 6. The Laki eruption's destruction was felt all across the world for years after it happened. Over the course of its 8-month eruption, Laki produced 14.7 cubic kilometers of lava. 60% of Iceland's grazing animals perished due to toxic gas poisoning of crops. There was enough SO2 released by the volcano to produce acid rain and a dip in world temperatures. Over 10,000 Icelanders perished in a famine brought on by the eruption, which at the time represented almost a fourth of the nation's population. The toxic eruption from Laki, which moved south, killed 23,000 people in Britain and sparked a famine in Egypt. According to some environmental historians, the French Revolution may have been sparked by the European starvation brought on by the eruption. 4. Mount Pelee, Caribbean, 1902, VEI 4. Mount Pelee was believed to be dormant until it erupted in the worst eruption of the 20th century. Saint Pierre was completely destroyed on May 8 when Mount Pelee erupted in a fiery eruption of volcanic debris and hot gas. Only 2 of the 28,000 residents of Saint Pierre were still alive. The eruption was believed to have cost $50 million. The details of what transpired on May 8, Ascension Day, are up for debate, but one thing is certain. Saint Pierre was completely destroyed by an infernal blast of hot gas and volcanic debris in a matter of minutes. Only a few of its almost 30,000 inhabitants remained minutes later, including the governor, who had traveled there with his family to calm the populace. Suffocation and burns that seared their skin and lungs were the main causes of death for most of the victims. The gas cloud's estimated temperature, according to later investigations based on burned wood, was between 350 and 400 degrees Celsius. Victor Albert, one of the witnesses, reported what happened to the French newspaper La Croix after watching the explosion from his field. A flash more dazzling than a thunderbolt happened. A cloud that had just formed on Montagne Pelee's summit practically descended on Saint-Pierre at the same time, making it impossible for anyone to flee. The explosion flattened the village, toppling enormous stone statues several meters from their perches and sparing just a few walls that were parallel to the blast, suggesting that the cloud's speed exceeded 100 meters per second. After that, Saint-Pierre burned for several days. Ships in the harbor sank and started to burn. When rescuers finally made it to the wreckage, they extracted Louis Auguste Cypris from a jail cell. Cypris afterwards went on tour with the Barnum and Bailey Circus. However, once the haze lifted, researchers started to question what actually occurred on Mount Pelee. According to geologist Jean-Claude Tanguy, scientists at the time had only a basic understanding of volcanology, which was mostly focused on Mount Vesuvius's historical eruptions in Italy. He claimed in an article published in 1994 that this would explain why no one considered leaving Saint Pierre in the days leading up to the eruption because the approaching disaster was just incomprehensible. Geologists created a word for the blast that obliterated the city as a result of the tragedy. The most thorough account of the disaster was written by a member of the French Geological Survey named Alfred Lacroix in 1904. Who called the phenomena nuée ardente, which translates to flaming or burning cloud. Geologists today would classify this dangerous mixture of hot gas and rock as a form of pyroclastic flow. And examples of these flows have since been seen during other volcanic eruptions, such as Mount St. Helens in 1980. However, for the majority of the next century, geologists disagreed as to what caused Pelee's nuée ardente. Some claim that the eruption spilled sideways out of the crater's lowest point, which faced Saint Pierre, after shattering the recently constructed lava dome. Others claimed that a gigantic column soared into the air before collapsing abruptly. Ilopango, El Salvador, 450 AD, VEI 6+. The second largest volcanic explosion in the past 200,000 years was the first known eruption of Ilopango, which occurred in 450 AD. It is believed that a number of Mayan cities were devastated by this enormous eruption. For more than a year, ash and dust covered the skies. Up to 100,000 people may have died in the eruption and over 400,000 people may have been displaced. Crop failures from Rome to China were caused by the global chill that occurred in AD 535 to 536 and is believed to be its origin. Ilopango saw a powerful Plinian eruption in the 5th century AD. It was one of the biggest eruptions in Central America and the largest eruption in El Salvador in the last 10,000 years. The eruption was more comparable to Tambora 1815 than Krakatoa 1883 or Pinatubo in 1991, and it was much larger. It is 6 to 7 VEI. It produced massive pyroclastic flows that covered 10,000 square kilometers in 50 centimeters or more of pumice and ash, over 70 cukm of tephra eruption, and significant ashfall. A 100 kilometers radius around the volcano was destroyed by pyroclastic flows and ashfall. A sophisticated Mayan society dominated and resided in the highlands of El Salvador at the time of the eruption, which had a significant impact on the region's cultural history. Numerous people fled to the lowland regions of Guatemala and Belize as a result of the eruption, which also devastated communities and killed thousands of people. It put an end to the Mayan presence in the highlands, and it took the area a long time to recover. The Mayas gave up control of a crucial trading route, and Tikal came to be in charge. Some of the buried settlements have recently undergone modern excavations, shedding new light on Mayan society. 6. Mount Unzen, Japan, 1792, VEI 2. The deadliest volcanic eruption in Japan has always been Mount Unzen. The explosion caused the volcano's dome to collapse, causing a tremendous landslide that buried Shimabara and spilled into the ocean, causing a wave that was 57 meters high. About 15,000 people perished in the calamity. Damages to fish and agricultural infrastructure were estimated to have cost $17.4 billion yen, approximately $150 million. In Japan, Mount Unzen is a byword for catastrophe. When the volcano's dome grew and eventually collapsed in 1792. It caused the biggest eruption tragedy in Japanese history, resulting in a major landslide and wave that killed an estimated 15,000 people. In 1990, over 200 years later, Mount Unzen started to splutter once more. About 10,000 pyroclastic flows were observed on Unzen's sides between 1991 and 1994, some of which were observed up to 5.5 kilometers, 3.4 miles, from the dome. In Shimabara City, which is located under the volcano, more than 2,000 houses had been damaged by these scorching ash and gas surges by summer 1993. Volcanic domes have been linked to some of the most devastating eruptions. Japanese authorities are constantly enhancing their warning systems and evacuation procedures to protect public safety. Volcanic domes, which develop as magma builds up into a muffin-shaped structure and forces its way out of a crater vent, frequently don't give any warning until it's too late. Dome formation is a problem since it can happen swiftly geologically. For instance, in just 24 hours, the dome on Mount St. Helens in the Pacific Northwest of the United States increased from 16 feet high and 82 feet in diameter to 164 feet high and 606 feet in circumference. 7. Nevado del Ruiz, Colombia, 1985, VEI 3. The Nevado del Ruiz eruption, despite being only moderately large, had disastrous effects. The subsequent mudflow, which buried the village of Armero and claimed 20,000 lives, was the most harmful aspect of the eruption. Nevado, which cost an estimated $1 billion, is recognized by the International Disaster Database as the most expensive volcanic eruption.